Hello friends, today I'm going to talk about giving you some idea on different environments, how they work. I'm also going to talk about tools like Git, SVN or TFS, all these version control tools. I'm going to talk about the code repository, why is it so important. I'm going to talk about the Jenkins, how does Jenkins work, and also I'm going to talk about the automation framework and the components. So when you go for your automation task or automation job, uh, basically these are the components that you would be able to see in any projects. There may be different ways of developing the framework. The design pattern may differ from different companies, but more or less these are the common components that every standard automation frameworks should cover. So let's go with the first with the automation framework, how it works. Automation framework, um, if you are using any database like SQL or Oracle, then you might need to have getting the DB connections, all the setup classes that are needed to be configured. These are needed only if you are going to access the database through your automation script, and that time you would need to get the DB config all set up. If you are going to use Cucumber into your framework, then only the feature files would come in pictures. The feature files are Cucumber's file that would have all of the test scripts, and these are the scripts that would get executed whenever you run the test. Test harness is basically you are going to collect the test what you wanted to run, and so it would basically be like the big test um, as a overall, like a regression test or smoke test or all these different kind of harness based on your testing scope. When it is used, testing harness is going to build then. So if you have a regression test and you want to then cover what are the different tests that are part of the regression, you wanted to build the test harness based on the regression scope. If you have anything like a smoke test only, where you want to just do quick sanity test, then you might want to limit your scope, make it the quickest possible, and do just quick sanity test, so that you can use that during release and deployment, post deployment activities, or even before the release you want to run smoke test. Not only the release activities, but smoke test harnesses are used into day to day whenever you want to do quick system checks, stuff like that. Test execution is the next one. Test execution is basically you wanted to have some sort of definitions into your framework, like having all some sort of steps or any required test data, or whatever it requires, the way you are going to execute your test. Normally Jenkins is the best tool to run the test. So every test that you want to execute, you want to just get the Jenkins configured, where you would have different nodes where the test will get triggered. Jenkins is going to read the code from the repository. We'll talk about that later. And then you want to define them. Test setup is basically the having the setup classes or files, where you would have to before your test even executes, you want to get those things set up. Basically this would be like a setup step or setup method, where you would have your browser setup, your desired capabilities, where you start your browser, what are the minimum like SSL that you might have to bypass, all these sort of things. And not only that, you might want to do some, read some data or some like files that you want to read before the test start. All of these informations are being defined in here. There's a test data file. So this is just source files such as Excel sheets or properties files and all that thing that you require your test to run. Logs and reports are post execution stuff where you are running your test and you want to get some sort of graphic output on as a reports. So it depends, how depth of the reports or how detailed oriented reports. There are external tools that you would be able to use in order to define and get more better viewing reports. Logs are basically the way you can find to trace if there's any issues or failures, so that you can go to those log reports. Log is just like a text document that is being created, and then these files you would just go look and be able to trace the failures. Logs would needed to be defined along with every tests, every Java steps. Wherever you write any method you think you need any logs, you would basically have to define them, so whenever time comes, if anything happens, you get logs there. Logs are of all different kinds. There are debug mode, there are errors, those are info. The ones are the infos is just to give you as informational message, or errors are something that you wanted to trigger if anything happens, and then so that errors just differently than the info, so that you can easily go read them. Methods and Java steps are basically whenever you write any Selenium steps, like you want to fill in the form, you create a method to fill in the form, that is kind of a method. Or it could be the steps are normally terminologies that you would use for step definitions for the feature files into the Cucumber, or just a simple method where you would write them in order to interact with any browser's activities. If you have any your framework defined with the page factory model, then you might have to have a page classes, and then the methods associated to those page classes, where you would define all individual ID and locators of any elements, and then what you want to do with those elements, those related methods are also defined there. Config.properties is one of the properties file, which is just as a text, where you would want to keep it separate, and you want to simply keep the config related informations like the host name or database stuff, or you might have to get some URL or any username password thing that is frequently changing, or some sort of things that you would require as a config files. These are basically the standard template or standard items that are included into the testing framework. Don't go with my serial wise. This location may vary where you want to put them. Normally they are under the Maven project, where you would have a main and then test. Main/java, that source folder where you would put all setup or config related stuffs, and then common config items. The all file related items will be stored inside inside the source folders, and then all test classes, page classes, and then any Selenium steps will be inside test/java source folder. So that is pretty much how you would have your framework defined. And then let's move on to how the process works, QA process works. First of all, whenever your requirement is defined and your sprint starts, or if you have a waterfall, then the development phase starts. Then the green section here, you see the dev sandbox box is the one of the environment where developers will start developing the new codes or new requirement that is being defined as per the user stories. And as soon as they're done, they do some form of unit testing, and then they verify those codes are working and it has met up some of the all requirements that is defined or asked. Then they will use tools like a Git, or here if you see there's a different tools I wrote: Git, SVN, Perforce, TFS. One of the tools, based on what the company has, they're going to use one of those tools that they have, and then with the help of that tools they will push the code into repository. A repository is just like a server where it will have all of the different versions of codes. So the Git, what it does is it will basically work as a transporter that will transport these codes into the repository box. Then what happens is, once the code is deployed here, then they will have to do some build where you will have all different jars or artifacts, anything that needed to be loaded, and then basically compile the whole code and make it a package. Once it is done, then they will have to deploy them. There are different ways to deploy the codes from one to another environment. So for now, let's go with you will deploy, then only you will be able to see the codes into QA environment that you are actually being working on. QA environment are also called testing environment. So this is the environment which has integrated applications. So all different applications are here, so that the code that works in dev environment may not work into QA environment always, but that's, as a tester, your job is to ensure the requirement has been met and it integrates met and it works similarly as it is integrated with all different applications. So this is the testing environment where you would be doing your manual testing, you'd be doing your automation testing, and everything, every testing activities only happens in QA or test environments. So once the code is deployed, then only you'll be able to see the code. Unless the code is deployed into QA environment, whatever dev environment has may not reflect as it is there, because it requires every code has to be pushed. That process is called deployment. So after that, so these are the testing environment. But as a tester, automation tester, if you are writing any code inside your framework, here if you see this arrow, that code also need to be pushed into some repository. So it may be different repository, or it may be same repository. That has nothing to do with it has to be same linked, but it is the same repository, but it may have different branch you might have to push, or unless you are using the same branch. So branch is basically the Git has some sort of section that you are defining to each of these codes as their versions. So each one may be using the different branches. Different project that work with using the same Git code repository may have different set of tools, different set of codes, and also may have different versions of the codes. So once you committed your code, which is called committed, is called same as you push the code to the repository. You would use the same way like the developers will push the code. You would use the same tools that is available in your company. So Git, SVN, Perforce, DFS, or there may be any more tools. These are just common examples. Once you push the code, you would be pushing only thing that is different from what is already there. Basically you will be only pushing the code that is what you made changes to what already is there. Before you push any codes, you will have to always pull the latest code, and so the repository, every different team member continuously will be pushing codes into the repository. So the version that you have in your local computer may not be current as per the repository. So before you push your code, you have to first pull your code from repository, and at that time, if the same file you modified has been modified with somebody else in your company, then there may be chances of conflicts too that you have to merge before you push the code. Let's say everything is done properly and you push the code. Now the code repository has most current version of the codes onto entire framework. It will have everything that your package has. So once it is there, then Jenkins is going to read. So Jenkins not only do the testing activities, it will help doing the build deploy also for the codes from different environments too. Let's say you are as automation tester, you want to execute your test into Jenkins. Then the process it works is you have your code modified, you put that code into repository, and then Jenkins will access your code from the repository. Jenkins do not talk to your local computer. Jenkins will talk to the repository. From there, based on the parameters you are provided, what test you want to run out of that, all that thing, it will pull that exactly same code, and then it will compile. So once it compiles, then it will trigger that test. Jenkins triggering test is called build. So if you not only test, any job that you trigger from Jenkins is called build. So don't get confused what build is as opposed to running the test. It is basically the same thing. It is not different. It is simply the click tool that is provided for you to facilitate your testing activities. And to talk briefly about the Jenkins is basically the CI/CD tool which helps doing continuous integration and continuous deployment. This is basically, this works in server level, where it is kind of have some nodes set up. From it will work as a hub, and then it will trigger test into different nodes that are available. So you want to run your test, then Jenkins will help triggering test to different nodes, assign them. Node is basically the machine where the test would run. Node is meaning one single machine. It's called node. When you run your test, there may be multiple nodes that you have assigned to be running the test. So your test will be spread across different nodes and run the test based on how you are configuring your test. So friends, I think this is pretty much to cover on giving you an idea about environments, and then talk about more how the versioning tool works, code repository works, and basically just give you idea about the how the process, QA process or dev process, or your normal routine of as an automation tester or a manual tester would work in your organization. I believe this has been very helpful. When you go in any interviews, you'll be asked so many questions on these areas. basically you would need to really understand how the working flow is. This is basically the flow. That's how your day-to-day activities goes with. Please, there's so much information I put it in this video. So if you are not clear, please repeat this. This will be very helpful, and um, watch again and again until you are totally familiar with what these stuffs are for. And I think this will be all for this video, and I'll be having more videos on other videos that I will be posting soon. And again, thank you very much for watching this video, and please, if you have not, subscribe my channel and support my channel, and then feel free to like, put comments where I can give you some more feedbacks if you have any questions. Thank you very much for watching this video again, and we'll look forward in our next video. Thank you.